This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, now that we are in the meeting, I'm going to do a roll call for the council, and then I'll ask for an attendance of everybody else on the call. Councillor Booton noted he would not be in attendance. Councillor Himmel,
Present.
Councillor Maury,
Present.
Councillor Rio,
Present.
Councillor Steinman,
Present.
Councillor Wazizak.
Present.
Okay, so we do have a quorum. Also noted, we have David Delcor from the Times-Argus. We have Janet Shatney, who is our planning director. We have our chief of we have our city clerk, Carol Dawes, named Christopher Wurzima is from CVTV. We have Don Monahan, who is our finance director. We have Douglas Brent, who is our chief of the fire department. We have councilors as noted, Jeff Bergeron from our buildings department. It says Joe. I'm going to assume that is our assessor, Joe.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have Tom Lazon as well. Is there anyone else on the call that I have not mentioned?
Yeah, Peter.
And Peter Anthony. That will be, I'm assuming, caller number 2. So I'm just going to take a quick second and label it as such. So now that we are in the meeting, we have taken the attendance. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I just had one question about the warrant that I don't think merits pulling it off the consent agenda, but just a question I had for that.
When we get into the consent agenda, we will do that under the consent. Okay. Seeing nothing under adjustments to the agenda, so I will look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Wazizak, seconded by Councillor Hemrick. So discussion, and Councillor Hemrick, you had a question on one of the warrants?
Yeah, on page 5 of Warrant Report 2017, I noticed there was 12,000 for Novus Morrison Solar estimated monthly output to 5 different accounts. I was just wondering, is this an electricity purchase, and how is that volume estimated?
Yeah,
Steve, do you want to address that one?
I can speak to that. Yeah, it has to do with the agreements we have with the solar projects. That one, I think, is the Booth Morrison. Don can correct me if I'm wrong. But when the solar projects were developed, we had to identify a metered accounts to which the credits could be allocated. And there are 5 accounts. And I think there are 3 in the general fund, and 1 in water and 1 in the sewer fund. So that's what that does. It's the same invoice for 12 months, and we true up in July. In the last couple of years, we've actually had a credit and they've reimbursed us. But sometime it may go the other way, but we true up for the following year. So that lump sum amount will get adjusted.
Thank you.
I had myself muted. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'll do the roll call vote. Councillor Hemrick?
Aye.
Councillor Maury?
Aye.
Councillor Reel?
Aye.
Councillor Steinman?
Aye.
Councillor Wazizak?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Thank you very much. Clerk.
Yes, just a couple things. A reminder that fourth quarter property taxes are due by May 15. And you can put them in the mail or drop them through the drop box by the front door, or we do also have an online option. If you go to the Barre City website, at the top there's a button that says online payments, and you can make payments for taxes, water and sewer, dog licenses, building permits, parking tickets. There's a bunch of things there. So that's one of the options that we've put in place because City Hall is closed to the public. We are still inside working, but we have closed the building. So that's the other announcement that I have.
Quick question.
Yep.
If someone was to put their taxes in the drop box, would the 15th be acceptable, or should they plan earlier?
No, what we do is with the Dropbox, we check it at 4:30, just as we're closing the office on the due date.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure everyone hears that.
Yep.
Thanks.
I do have just one quick announcement under liquor control. The liquor control, the Department of Liquor and Lottery has put in place a intent to renew process for license holders. Usually license holders are issued renewals in January, and the forms are due back to us by the end of April. Quite a few of those establishments are currently closed, and so what DLL has put in place is a way for those establishments to go onto their website and say, yes, it is our intention to renew. And then at some time after the stay home, stay safe order is lifted and establishments start to reopen, then the Department of Liquor and Lottery will get in touch with them about actually completing their renewal. As long as they sign up by April 30th, they will be considered effective. Their license will continue to be in effect, which means they can still have product on they can have inventory in stock and such. So we have 6 establishments that still haven't either sent in their renewals to us or have renewed online, done the intent to renew online with the department. And we'll be following up with them over the next week just to make sure that they do one or the other before the end of the month. That's it.
Any other questions for the city clerk? Okay, hearing none. Liquor control has been covered. We'll move on to the city manager's report.
Yeah, a couple items and then 2 or 3 announcements. Now that the intensity of the COVID compliance and furlough programs has settled in, I started last week trying to spend more time to address backlog of more routine operational items, summer projects planning, implementation of project work, and capital purchases approved in the 2019-2020 infrastructure capital bonds. So we'll continue to focus on that. The original target date of May 1st for the Park Mobile implementation is on probably indefinite hold, hopefully not too long, but until the COVID restrictions are relaxed, the vendor from New Hampshire can't come up to reset the meter fees. So we're waiting for him to do that. There's some other support work that's going on, stickers and signage and so on, but that's the key element there. So it probably is going to be sometime after May 15th and hopefully in early June, but we'll keep you posted. And then just the routine announcements of the scrap metals drop-off event, which is sponsored by the Washington County Sheriff's Department. That'll be May 3rd at the auditorium. It'll be a drive-through, so you won't have to get out of your car. It's the proceeds benefit caps for cops, and it'll bring aluminum batteries, brass, copper, iron, lead, radiators, stainless steel, wire and cable, grills, and lawnmowers. And that's it. No refuse, no junk, no hazardous waste, nothing like that.
Steve, just for clarification, is that Saturday, May 2nd?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, May 2nd. The yard waste drop-off, sponsored by the city, will run on the 4 consecutive Saturdays, May 9th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th. It's from 8 a.m. to noon. There are limited dates and hours this year just because of the COVID backdrop, but we will still have the event. And then there's a used tire disposal event for which we've submitted a grant, or will be submitting tomorrow, a grant for to the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District. It'll be on June 13th at the auditorium, and as soon as we get that firmed up, there'll be more details. And that's all I have under the manager's report.
Any questions for the manager? Okay, seeing none, moving right along. We are under visitors and communications. Is there anyone that wants to address an item that is not on the agenda? And I'm looking over into the chat, and I do not see anything written into the chat. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to old business. 8A is the COVID-19 city response update. Steve?
Yeah, I have a few items here. Although there were a couple of minor wrinkles, the furlough program got off to a relatively smooth start, so we're glad for that. I think we have upwards of 20 employees participating, and it's critical to try to control the year-end deficit, so we're appreciative of the response we got. As part of the fiscal year 20 cost control measures, we will not be purchasing or planting flowers or bulbs in any of the cemeteries. This results in a planned expense reduction of approximately $7,500. A number of department heads plan to sit in on a VLTC seminar, a webinar tomorrow, and it's focused on essential functions, and we're hoping to get elaboration and clarification on essential function classifications. Hopefully that will be helpful. And we continue with limited operations necessary to support those services deemed essential at the local level. We have recalled our permits administrator as a request for permits activity is increasing notably, and we want to facilitate new construction when it can occur, and the resulting operational revenue and ultimate grand list increases that will come from those permits. So we're gearing up a little bit to support those requests. I guess the last item, as the COVID operating environment has reasonably settled down, it's much less reactive than it was before. It's really just looking for clarifications along the way, and we'll see how the relaxation proceeds at the state level. But what I'll do is I'll incorporate COVID updates under the manager's report and just take this off the agenda as a standing item. And that's all I had under the COVID report.
So Steve, speaking to the furlough program, you noted that one employee had to be brought back. Does that impact the amount that you were anticipating for savings?
Oh yeah, it will, because that wages will come out of the budget rather than out of the furlough. But this isn't necessarily a factor, but that position will also generate some revenue. But it'll be striking a balance from here to the end of October. As manager, I'm expecting it's going to get tougher the further we go. People are going to be anxious to cut. Some people will be. Some people, frankly, are probably a little bit better off being on furlough and unemployment than actually working. But I'm expecting the challenges to strike a balance between furloughs and bringing back people is going to get more challenging as each week goes on. And I'm very mindful of the financial objective of the furlough program, which was to try to save around $175,000 to help offset a projected $250,000 deficit. So I'm expecting it'll be a challenging 2.5 months.
Any other questions for the manager? Seeing none, we do have item 8B, which is the ratification of the collective bargaining agreement. There is information that was sent out to us earlier today. I didn't know if council wanted to defer that until after executive session in case there were any questions. Any feedback?
Mr. Mayor, I certainly, if that's the pleasure of the council, but I would hope that there wouldn't be any questions. That what went out today was, I only received word at 2 o'clock that they had ratified the agreement, so I sent that back out. That's the same memo that was sent out on March 17th. It's a rather, well, Well, no settlement is perfunctory by any means, but I think it's a straightforward action if the council cares to take it.
Yep. If there's no need, that is fine. I just want to give the option. And then I'd look for a motion to ratify the collective bargaining agreement with local number 4-68 of the USW. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Steinman, seconded by Councillor Maury. Any discussion?
I can elaborate a little bit, especially since David is looking in, but he'll ask me for the briefing memo anyway, so he'll get the details. But basically, it's a reasonably straightforward settlement. It parallels to some degree the Department of Public Works settlement. The meat of the settlement is wages and health insurance. It's a 3-year contract. A 3% adjustment the first year, 3.25% the second year, and 3% the third year. This is retroactive to July 1st. It also includes increases of 2.5% in the employee's health insurance share for the first 2 years. There's no adjustment in the third year. And then there are other elements of the agreement where we gave a little and we also got a little. I'm pleased with some of the improvements that we made to the agreement and to which the membership agreed to. So all in all, I think it's a good agreement. And as like any agreement, we didn't get everything we wanted and they didn't get everything they wanted.
Okay. Any other discussion? Being none, I'll look for the affirmative votes and I'll go down through the list. Councillor Hemrick,
Aye.
Councillor Maury,
Aye.
Councillor Reel,
Aye.
Councillor Steinman,
Aye.
Councillor Wazizak,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're now on to item 9A, which is the Board of Abatement meeting. It was warned for 7:15. It is now 7:19. I have not seen anyone come or go from the room. So I will turn that meeting over to Peter Anthony, who is on the phone. Peter, are you there?
I am. Board of Abatement, come to order. Clerk Dawes, can you confirm that there is a quorum?
Yes, we have a quorum of the council. We have the assessor present. We have the treasurer present, and that's what we need to establish a quorum.
Fair enough. As you all know, because the council has grappled with this issue, lots of people are stressed out to keep up with both water and sewer and property tax payments. Thanks to former Mayor Lozon, it was revealed to me and I think to the mayor and clerk that the action that you folks had taken last meeting and earlier on March 24th couldn't be left the way it was, for the simple reason that the Board of Abatement, under whose authority we're now acting, could not prospectively forgive interest and penalties. So, as the clerk and the mayor have suggested to me, what we will have to do, assuming the council wants to move ahead and the Board of Abatement agrees to forgive penalties and interest for both property taxes and water and sewer, we will have to proceed every 2 weeks as those penalties and fees are assigned and assessed and proceed. So with that, we're okay to forgive those penalties that have already arisen as of April 15th. But I need a motion. It would be obviously retrospective in effect to forgive the penalties interest that had already accrued as of April 15th. And then we'll have to get on a cycle, as is suggested, every 2 weeks when those are booked, so to say. We will have to keep at it as long as the suggestion of the council is coincident with what we're willing to do. And I gather the termination date of that process would be June 30. So with that, I have to open the floor for a motion.
Well, before the motion, Chairman, I was just wondering, do you know of any action that's happening legislatively that would have an effect on this?
Not at the moment. I must say there are alive and well actions on the Senate and on the House side, but they have not come to the floor. They have not certainly moved through the government operations committee process as yet. Certainly, if that happens, I'd let you know. But at the moment, I think it's left to a local decision for the interim.
Okay, and I did see Mr. Lauzon had his hand up.
I did, Mayor. There actually has been some activity in the Senate. On the 15th, Senate GovOps actually approved a plan to allow select boards without coming to the Board of Authority, allow select boards and city councils the ability to make these types of decisions on their own, recognizing that right now we're in extraordinary times, and as Mr. Anthony said, people do need assistance. People are going to need assistance. Interestingly, this was also the lead story. It's part of a much bigger conversation that they're having currently on the Senate side. Obviously, there's great concern over the fact that education payments from municipalities such as the city of Barre are due soon. It is doubtful, given projections for decreased property tax collections, kind of doubtful that all municipalities in Vermont are going to have those funds. If they don't remit the funds, they incur a fairly substantial penalty, as the clerk knows. So this is all part of a much bigger discussion. I mean, I suspect the league. I know our city clerk has been very active in the discussions, and the league is very active. So this is all part of a much broader discussion, and I think you'll have some sort of legislative relief, in the next couple of weeks. This was also the lead story on WCAX this evening, and a number of people weighed in on it, again, recognizing that people are going to need assistance. Certainly businesses are going to need assistance. So, I suspect you'll see some sort of legislative relief in the next 2 weeks, and you won't have to keep seeing my bearded face on your space shuttle launch screen here. But like I said, my only concern is this is a crisis. Serving on the governor's economic mitigation and recovery task force, the scope of this crisis is concerning. But it's not an excuse to set statute and ordinance and charter aside. So I appreciate, Mayor, you taking the time to speak with me this afternoon and let me express my concerns. And let's face it, this city, one of the things I love most about this city is we are going to do the right thing. People are going to need our help, and we'll all be looking for to be the first person in line to help people. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Chair, I'm just going to see if there's people speaking or with their hands up, and I will let you know as we go through this, if that's fine with you.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Okay. Is there anybody else with any other comments Okay, so Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. We're still at the point of recognizing that there are penalties and interest that are accruing and are being lodged due and payable as of April 15th. And so the motion we need is to forgive those that have already been assessed.
And Mr. Chair, if I might, just for clarification purposes, this would include the delinquent taxes that accrued penalties and interest on March 15th. It would include water and sewer that incurred penalties and interest on April 1st, and taxes that accrued additional interest on April 15th.
Correct, yes. When I say accrued, I mean all the cumulative ones on each of the 3 dates you mentioned. Thanks. Do I have a motion?
Oh, so moved, sorry.
Okay, and a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, just to be clear, we're abating penalties and interest on those that have accrued collectively and cumulatively through April 15th. And then let's call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, you folks are better equipped to decide whether we won the vote. Those opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passed. And you folks,
just to note,
yeah, sorry.
we normally have to do a roll call vote according to, since we're video conferencing. If no one is opposed, we didn't hear a no. I think that we can all agree that that was unanimous and we don't have to go down through the roll call.
It's up to you. You guys are, visually connected. I am not. If you're more comfortable with it, the clerk can do that. Otherwise, since there are no no's, as far as I'm concerned, the vote was unanimous. And you folks, in consultation with the mayor and myself, will have to decide how to move forward because, as was pointed out, this only clears the decks, so to say, through April 15th, as was voted.
Mr. Chair, I will work with the mayor and look to put dates on the upcoming council meeting agendas as we need them.
And I appreciate the former mayor's observation. As I understand it at the moment, we're really talking about transferring authority from the Board of Abatement to the City Council for the waiver. I don't think that at the moment the version that he spoke about essentially usurps local control, but I'll wait and see how it appears in the House. Thank you very much, and if you're all done with me, I'll leave the conversation. Thanks.
So before we exit the Board of Abatement, just one note, which is just to clarify, our council vote was to go through June 30th, and what we just approved as a Board of Abatement was the period through April 15th. So that part of it ratified. The rest of it is something that is, since we have not ratified it, we're going to have to come back to address that in order to deal with the rest of the items that were a part of that motion.
Absolutely. You're going to have to make a recommendation to abatement unless and until the legislature changes the authority from abatement to the City Council, and they haven't done that yet. So yes, make a recommendation through the clerk to the Board of Abatement, and we'll take it under advisement and be back to you and ask to be on the agenda if it's agreeable.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, if there's no other comments from this board, as soon as you say you are adjourned, I will return to the City Council meeting.
Okay. Unless there's objection, we are adjourned, and I'll wait 30 seconds for a sign of objection. Hearing none, the Board of Abatement is hereby adjourned. We're done. See ya.
Over and out, Houston.
Thank you very much. So Council, we are now back in session. We are moving on to item 9B, which is the annual adoption of the local emergency management plan. We do have Chief Brent on the call. Chief?
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to say it's nice to be with you, but I'm not really with you, but I am. We're all here on the Hollywood Squares. As you know, every year, Vermont Emergency Management requires us to make out this local emergency management plan. And it's really more of a list than it is a plan, but it has all of our local hazards on it, has all the personnel from the city that are required, all the contact numbers and so forth. That's why you probably see a redacted copy. Again, in our post 9/11 world that we live in, this used to be something that was posted everywhere so people could see it. Now we don't tend to do that quite as much because of the information that it would give away. It would be kind of like leaving the bank combination, the combination to the safe on a Post-it note inside the bank. So we try not to share this with everyone in the public, even though it's a public document, if you follow what I'm saying. This has been updated by Janet, viewed by all of the relative department heads, and different names and so forth have been added and taken out as the case so needed. And we're ready to present this for your annual acceptance, of which you would then authorize the mayor to sign on your behalf. I would also sign this, and then the copy would be going to the Regional Planning Commission, who would then put these together and forward them all from the area to Vermont Emergency Management. Gladly answer any questions. I also know Janet's on the line as well. She's a very important role in getting this done and ready every year. So I take any questions that anyone has at this time.
Any questions from council? There's no questions. I'll look for a motion to approve, or I should say a motion to adopt the local emergency management plan.
I make a motion.
So motion made by Erica, seconded by Jake. Any other discussion? Being none, I'll do the roll call vote. Councillor Hemrick.
Aye.
Councillor Maury.
Aye.
Councillor Reel.
Aye.
Councillor Steinman.
Aye.
Councillor Wazizak.
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Brent.
Thank you. Good to see everyone.
Good to see you too. Moving on to item 9C, the authorization for Du Bois and King, Inc. for the Alumni Hall Boiler Design Agreement. And we do have Jeff Bergeron on the call. Jeff? Oh, Jeff, we still can't hear you for some reason. Hello? Can anybody else hear him?
Negative.
Yeah,
Mr.
I
Mayor,
can't hear you.
I can jump in if his
So
audio.
Steve, how about you try to give an overview, and if Jeff agrees, he can nod, because I think that's the best we can do at this point. Is that fine with you, Jeff? Okay, or a thumbs up, that works too.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, I sent out a summary memo with the packet. This is a continuation with Du Bois and King in the phased approach to replacing the boiler. We did an assessment evaluation of the boiler last, I'm going to say spring or over the summer. I've lost track of time. Once we got the bond vote passed in March, it opened the door to be able to move ahead with this replacement program. As we said in the memo, the boiler is in desperate need of replacement. We've been fortunate to have gotten through the last 2 or 3 seasons without a major problem. It doesn't owe us anything. It's a 1975 boiler. So I laid out I think the essence, and you've had a chance to review the agreement. So I would look for a motion to approve moving ahead. As I said in the memo, the timing is right. We can get the design done and the installation done over the summer so that we will be ready for the next heating season. And the funds are budgeted in the 2 capital infrastructure bonds. This does not come out of the general fund.
Don moves.
Okay, is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay, motion made by Councillor Steinman, seconded by Councillor Maury. Any discussion? Councillor Hemrick.
Yeah, one question I had was just as a new counselor and trying to understand how the phased capital projects interplay with our procurement policy. Will there be a competitive vendor selection at for the build stage, or has there already been?
No, no. Likely, there probably would be, but I wouldn't rule out with council approval maybe a team approach to that, but that remains to be seen. And normally, with every procurement step, we look for council approval. We really have to have council approval. So. Yeah,
and just as a follow-up, and then I'm not saying that DK is not the right vendor. It just seems like for capital outlays of $200,000 like this project, not to have some form of competitive selection to see if there could be a better price. It seems like we're missing an opportunity for savings for the taxpayers, or potential opportunity.
Well, remember, what you're doing here is you're soliciting professional services. You're not really soliciting bids. The procurement policy does provide for even a sole source procurement at an original step, but this is a completion of a project where Dubois and King was brought in. Frankly, D&K was brought in initially because of their expertise in HVAC systems, and because of the assistance they gave us, they really filled the gap when we had the boilers both go down in City Hall. So, and normally, typically, once you start down the road on a particular project with a consultant that has often been competitively selected, you stay with that consultant for continuity of and consistency of the planning, the design, and so on and so forth. But we routinely go out for competitive procurements, qualification-based procurements, when we're starting a new phase of any project.
So, Steve, I think just to echo what I think Councillor Hemrick is saying is, if there are different phases of this project at the beginning, if you're picking one and then the second part is phase 2, you want to keep because the phase 1, they're already a part of it. That's a phased approach, but it really doesn't give opportunity throughout all those phases for other people to bid. So if you're going to be doing it as a whole, maybe it's one large bid, or if just being more transparent in the fact that if you win phase 1, then you probably will be that person of record in phase 2.
Well, and we've often done that in the past when we've put out the original RFPs. We've said that there's the possibility that the original vendor would be selected, or consultant would be selected for subsequent phases. If you're satisfied with the services, typically you continue. It's for large projects, it's the perception that somehow you save money by switching consultants at different steps of a major project, I think is a misperception. There's a lot to be said for the continuity of professional approach, the continuity of the design team, the working relationship established with the city reps, and as long as all the work is not going to one consultant, I think it's. I'm very comfortable with it. But
any other comments or questions?
And so, just as one additional follow, Mr. Mayor. So this is something that the city could, moving forward, package all 3 phases and submit that out for competitive vendor selection, unless that selection process is waived by council according to our policy.
Yes. Part of the difficulty is, though, at the very beginning of a significant infrastructure project where you don't know or you haven't completed a preliminary design or a preliminary assessment or preliminary evaluation, it's really hard to identify a scope of the whole project and then ask for competitive proposals for work that's extremely vague in definition. So that's another reason to argue for the phased approach. It allows you to get more accurate fee proposals along the way. Not that you can't do it the other way, but I think it's a lot more vague the other way.
So just maybe for clarification, if we saw all of the different phases that the council has voted and approved, and to see the different vendors that have been approved for each, so then therefore we know that not all of these are going to one company, but it shows that there is others that have been considered along with the current vendor that we're discussing tonight as part of that open and competitive bid process. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm not sure what you just said or asked.
Sure. So right now, if we're looking at authorization of one vendor for the Alumni Hall boiler design agreement, anytime that there has been a design agreement for the city for, say, the past 5 years, or anytime that there's a phase 1, 2, or 3 for the past 5 years, to see who has been awarded the bids.
Oh.
And that way there, it would show a representation of, is it always one vendor, or is there a competitive process by which other vendors have been selected?
Sure. I mean, if you're looking for something, like, give me 2 or 3 weeks to put it together, and I can be happy to get it to you.
So, Councilor Hemrick, would that be kind of the background to help address some of that concern?
I'm just interested to make sure that we're procuring services as competitively as we can, and we're making sure that we're getting the best value for these projects, and certainly can understand that there's makes sense to have continuity of services for some projects, and the procurement policy that we have recognizes that. It doesn't really talk about that once you've committed to one phase, you have to commit to the other phase, even though you don't know how much they're going to cost, or if that firm may be the best design firm, but maybe not the best building firm. So I think I'd feel more comfortable knowing that we are pursuing competitive selection as much as we can.
Yeah, let me just speak to your last comment. Du Bois and King would not be the construction, the third phase. They wouldn't be the construction arm. That would be put out to HVAC contractors who would bid the project. So the third phase will be a competitively bid project.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we do have a motion, I believe. Carol, correct me if I'm wrong. We have a motion, right?
Moved by Councilor Steinman, seconded by Councilor Maury.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no other discussion, I will go down through for the votes. Councilor Hemrick?
Aye.
Councilor Maury?
Aye.
Councilor Reel?
Aye.
Councilor Steinman?
Aye.
Councilor Wazazak?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 9D is the discussion or action of the FY21 grand list lodging tax bill issuance timetables. Carol?
What? That was a long title, wasn't it? I was trying to squeeze it all into one line. As many of you may know, the legislature, the Department of Taxes, Property Valuation and Review Division, there have been a number of changes with regards to deadlines and having to do with when the grand list needs to be lodged and with when we can expect to get our first download of homestead declarations and property tax adjustment payments. And so I wanted to bring that to council's attention so you could see, hopefully this matrix is helpful to give you an idea of what our usual dates are through the process of lodging the abstract grand list, holding grievance hearings, lodging the final grand list, setting the tax rate, mailing out tax bills, holding Board of Civil Authority hearings, what that timeline usually is, what the revised dates as per the legislature and the Department of Taxes, Property Valuation and Review, and what I'm recommending. In a nutshell, what we're looking at is likely getting the tax bills out a month later than we usually do. They're usually out in the mail by the middle of July because the first payment is due the middle of August. As per our charter. However, our charter, while it does set the dates, it also gives council the authority to change them as necessary. So looking at the dates that have been provided by the legislature, I think that my recommendation is that we look to get the bills out the middle of August with the first payment due the middle of September. And then you have to build your calendar back from that as far as when the tax bills have to go to the printer, which means when the tax rate has to be set, when the grand list has to be lodged, the grievance process has to be done, and you work your way back from there. And that's what's referenced in my memo. It's a lot of information. So I wanted to get it out to the council and to the manager and the assessor well enough in advance that that dates could be adjusted if need be, or we could have discussions as need be.
Council, do you have any questions? I do have the memo. I think it's the right memo that I can show on the screen. I just want to make sure that when I show it, does anybody have any questions thus far?
Unfortunately, it was not included in the packet, but I sent it out immediately afterwards.
And Carol, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if this is the wrong document, but I believe it's this one here where it has the dates.
It should, it's a chart. It's a 2-page memo with a chart. I can't see anything on my screen right now.
He's got the right one, Carol.
Okay.
Okay.
It's
So
dated.
it has making adjustments to the working grand list, ongoing, revised the date up to August 15th, and the recommendation is up to the date of the abstract lodging the abstract, making sure that it is by July 17th. Send out the changes of the assessment letters by July 20th. Then you have on here the holding of the grievance hearings to begin August 3rd and have done in responses mailed by August 7th. Then those are lodged for the final grand list by August 7th. And it shows that we received the education tax rate from the state by July 1st and received the homestead declaration and property tax rebates from the state by August 1st and set the municipal tax rate by August 7th. And then it has sending out those property tax bills by August 14th. And then it has the first tax installation due on September 15th, the grand list municipal tax rate to PVR, which is property valuation, September 15th. And then the BCA holds appeal hearings beginning October 21st through September and October, and additional adjustments allowed through the errors and omissions process through December 31st.
So the first big change, of course, is the lodging of the grand list. We typically have been, we lodge the latter part of June. This is when the assessor transfers the abstract grand list to me and sends out changes of appraisal notices to those property owners affected. It's when the grievance window opens and grievance hearings flow from there. To get the bills out by the 15th of August, we can't take advantage of the full date change that the legislature and PVR have put in place. They have allowed the grand lists to be lodged up until August 15. But what I'm recommending is July 17, which is about 3 weeks later than we usually are. But as you can see, about a month earlier than what the legislature and PVR is allowing. And the reason being that that's the date we'd have to go with if we wanted to get the bills out by the middle of August, to have the first payment due by the middle of September. And that's predominantly a cash flow issue. So,
Mr. Mayor, the assessor, I think Joe was still in the meeting. I don't know if Joe has any comment or insight or whatever.
The dates that Carol has put in here coincide with what the state's recommending for those towns that feel they need extra time. I don't feel I need extra time because I have until the 24th of June to lodge this abstract grand list. That still gives me enough time to complete everything, grievance hearings, by the 8th of July. And then once I have grievance hearings, it's all Carol's. And if she gets it on the 8th of July, she should be able to get it over to Brown's and get it all ready to go, and people get their tax bills at a regular time. I'm really heading for the 17th of June, which is about 3.5 weeks later than I lodged the grand list last year. This extra time really is going to mean a lot because it enables me to get everything done.
So Joe, are you advocating for the recommendations from the clerk, or are you saying that you don't need that?
Well, I'm saying I don't really need it, but it'd be nice if I really, really, really needed it to go through June, see where I am, and then these dates are out there if we need them. I don't think we're going to need them. I've always been able to get the grand list lodged on time with more than enough time for billing and everything else. This year is no different as far as I'm concerned. What the state has done due to the virus stuff is all fine and dandy, but most of that I don't need. Most of that I would never need because it's what I do. I mean, I look at a property, I know a lot of people. I don't have to go visit anybody. They just call them up on the phone. They give me what they got. Send them a notice. So I'm saying to you, give me till the middle of June to show you where we are. And then if we need extra time, Carol's got it all laid right out here, just like the state has laid it out. So it would be back and forth. If I went by Carol's recommendations, it just gives me more time. That's all.
So from what I'm hearing is if we took the suggestions by the city clerk, it says by certain dates. If it's done earlier than that, it can be sent out earlier, but this is making sure that there's deadlines that are set in place that they have to be sent out by.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Carol?
Mr. Mayor, yeah. The one thing that I would say is that the state has told us that we will be receiving the homestead declaration download and property tax rebate information from the state on August 1st. In the past, we've gotten it on July 1st. So that automatically pushes us with regards to when we can get the tax bills out. Excuse me, I've got a cat. Go away, cat. So the trying to keep her from walking right in front of me. So that pushes us a month anyway. And so I would say that probably what we need sooner rather than later from the council is an official setting of the date for the first payment. And my recommendation is that council set that for August 15, September 15, because we are not going to have tax bills out to meet the August 15th typical date. Once we have that date set, then I can work in conjunction with the assessor's office to work the calendar backwards.
Okay. And council, just to know, the recommendations here are by certain dates. So if from what Joe is saying, some of those items can be done sooner, then that's great. But the recommendation is that, for example, lodging the abstract in the grand list, we have up until August 15th, but it's noted that by July 17th that they would be done. If it could be done sooner, then so be it. But this is giving us dates to operate within. Correct. The only thing that is a set date would be the September 15th first tax installation due date, and that's the one that we have to set as a solid date.
All the rest of the installment dates would remain as they are, November, February, and May.
Yeah. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Moved by Councillor Hemrick, seconded by Councillor Maury. Just to restate, it is to take the recommendations from the city clerk on the chart that she has provided, the recommendations for dates that things will be lodged or hearings by, and all of them are dates to be completed by, except for September 15th, which is a due date for the first tax installment due. Listen for any other questions or comments. Councilor Maury?
One quick question, Mr. Mayor. I don't have the memo in front of me, but I think I remember a line about this triggering the need to do a tax anticipation note. And I was just curious if, and it's kind of unrelated to the timelines, but what our options are in terms of meeting our operating expenses without putting them on the credit card. And maybe that's an item for discussion another time, but I thought I remembered seeing something about a tax anticipation note in the memo.
Yes, I did include, the last line was saying that pushing the first date out a month may require us to tap into our tax anticipation note. We traditionally take out a tax anticipation note every year. And what's nice about it is that it allows us to, we actually arbitrage it, we're able to invest it, and then we're able to use it as we need it. For cash flow purposes. In this instance, what would likely happen is we would need to tap into it more early in the fiscal year than we have over the last few years. And that would potentially have an impact on the amount of interest that we earn on the arbitraged tax anticipation note. So there would be a net negative impact, whether it would be an increase in expenses or a decrease in revenue. There would be a little bit of a cost. But because we're not going to get the homestead declaration or property tax rebate file until August 1st, there's not much we can do about it. We could, if we wanted to, we could mail tax bills out with the original due date, and we would likely have to mail out about 1,000 or more revised bills shortly thereafter. And that would just create a tremendous amount of confusion with taxpayers and with mortgage and escrow companies. And of course, the additional cost associated with printing and mailing.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we do have a motion and a second. I'll go down through the list of councilors. Councilor Hemrick?
Aye.
Councilor Maury?
Aye.
Councillor Rio,
Aye.
Councillor Steinman,
Aye.
Councillor Wazizak,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. Thank you. And we'll move on to item 9E, which is approval of resolution 20-02 and the 1.7 million bond anticipation note documents. The city clerk.
Whoop, I'm back. This is pretty straightforward. You'll remember that I came before you a couple weeks ago with the matrix, the results of the bond anticipation note RFP that I put out, and that my intention was to enter into an agreement with Community National Bank. That's the paperwork that you have in front of you that requires council approval.
I'll make a motion that we go forward with our resolution on the $1.7 million bond anticipation note.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Moved by Councillor Steinman, second by Councillor Maury. Any discussion? Okay, it's being done. I will go down through the roll call. Councillor Hemrick,
Aye.
Councillor Maury,
Aye.
Councillor Rio,
Aye.
Councillor Steinman,
Aye.
Councillor Wazizak,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Thank you very much. Moving right along. Seems like the most expensive ones always go quicker for some reason. We are at board on the agenda here. Item 9F, which is the discussion regarding the revisions to the salvage yard and permitted vehicles on private properties ordinance. Councillor Steinman, this has your name next to it, and I know that our planning director is also on the call.
So this is the Wayback Machine that we're going to jump on here for a second. It was brought to the council's attention roughly a year ago that there was an issue with abandoned vehicles. And at the same time, we decided we were addressing that. We also addressed the salvage yards because the two topics are pretty much related. You should have received from the planning director the two proposed changes to both ordinances, and we're just open for discussion and suggestions.
So just for reference, in our Friday packet, starting on page 59 of 86, is the salvage yard ordinance for discussion.
Yeah, I had just a quick formatting thing on the second ordinance, the vehicles permitted on private property, I believe is the right one. Yeah, so on page 2, section 21-4, it's just a error with labeling. The within section 21-4 goes A, B, C, D, D, E, F, and then it starts GH, starts over again at E, F, G. So that's just a formatting typing.
Okay.
Yep, I agree. That's easy to fix.
So one question I will offer is, I mentioned this via email to the planning director. For the salvage yard ordinance, some of the issues that we dealt with back with the animal and fowl ordinance was about space on property. So think of a person with an acre lot versus with a person with a 0.08 acre lot. Sorry, I'm muting some people just because there's some background noise right now. So the question is, if you have a 1 acre lot versus a 0.08 acre lot, is there any restrictions based on the size of the property or dimension difference, meaning 20 feet off from the property line or something like that, that would be considered for this?
I can start the conversation there. As all of you may know, there weren't any in the current, and I didn't add any, nor did Councillor Steinman, in this draft at the moment. So it's certainly open for discussion.
John, did you have any thoughts on that?
Most of the property in the city aren't multi-acre spreads as it is. I mean, there are some properties, yes, but they're far and few between. And, you know, the chances of someone actually opening a junkyard probably wouldn't get through zoning. First of all, I think the purpose of the having a senior moment here. The purpose of the plan was so that we can deal with things that happen unofficially, so that we have a mechanism to solve those problems and get things cleaned up. I don't think there is a salvage yard currently in the city limits, and I don't think there hasn't been one for a very long time. So really, this is just a vehicle for us to regulate illegal salvage yards.
So the intent is really to give more teeth to what code enforcement can do when they find someone storing a number of vehicles on their property that are unregistered, something like that.
Or refrigerators, or boats, or, you know, anything. Granite blocks, you know, if it's, you know.
And do we, sorry, go ahead.
Councilor Wazizak, go ahead.
Do we have an idea, I don't know whether this is Janet or maybe Tim, or do we have an idea of like how many complaints would fall under the scope of this ordinance? Like if we were to adopt this today, how many cases just anecdotally of violations do you think we have in the city?
Most of the complaints we get right now fall under the trash ordinance, but these updates would be geared more towards piles of metal like appliances and things like that. So it would give, yes, it gives code enforcement a little bit more teeth and a couple different aspects to encourage our citizens to pick up more.
Councilor Hemrick?
Just one question I had about the interplay with the Unified Development Ordinance. So I noticed this proposed ordinance talks about getting certification from the Development Review Board. Would they do that through a site? What type of application would they do that through? A site plan, conditional use? How do we define a salvage yard within our use tables?
So as I explained in an email to Councilor Steinman, I was done with the Unified Development Ordinance that was adopted. There is no opportunity for any junkyard to be permitted in the city now.
Right.
So this is really geared towards anybody who might act like or has a property that might look like a junkyard.
So long story short, there shouldn't be one, but if there is one, we have no way to deal with it. And the intent of this is so that we can deal with those issues by making it so there's definitions to have penalties and fees assessed against.
Correct.
And although it's been a small problem in the past, it has been a problem in the past with less than a handful of individuals.
But some of those problems were fairly significant, especially the one above River Street comes to mind.
Oh, no, I'm not saying they were minute problems. I'm just saying there was a handful or less. But the ones that were problems were serious problems.
Yep.
So the only other question I have is, it looks like this is now two proposed ordinances instead of one. One is just dealing with the term salvage yard. The other one is regulations of vehicles on permitted private property. Is there a reason why that they needed to be separated, just for curiosity's sake?
I believe it was Oliver's recommendation to deal with the two separately. But this goes back a long way. I don't remember. But
So
they,
they're currently two different ordinances. And so both ordinances just got updated, so they marry into each other.
Okay.
They could be combined at some point.
make it very long.
Okay. So, council, there is no action on this tonight. This is just making sure that there were no other comments or suggestions. If people are ready for this, we can make sure that it's on a future agenda. So we do warn it for a first reading for both of them. And so that would be that process where we have to give at least, I believe it's 15 days in order to have it warned for the first meeting. And then we warn a second meeting for the public hearings. And then from there, it has a time period before it would be adopted as ordinance. So any other comments or suggestions at this point?
I do have a question, or maybe just a comment is that they both have been passed on to code enforcement, but no one from code enforcement has had the time or the opportunity to really weigh in yet. So I would like that opportunity to be had before or prior to. I guess it could be done at the first reading, but it would help if something just isn't working for them, that we would need to know that before a first reading.
Yes, my suggestion would be have them review this. We've seen all of these changes, so we can basically we understand what the track changes are here, and anything additional we just add notes to the side that state from code enforcement. These are items that we would like to see changed, and that can be sent out for discussion again. If we don't have to warn it right off, I think the more we forward a time where we can be back in person to have some of these conversations, it'll probably be helpful. So if you know, we do this one more time, we send it back out with those changes from enforcement, hopefully within the next 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks, then we can have that discussion of having something for a first reading. Does that make sense to everybody?
I just have a couple questions, maybe not really a question, but a statement. So I live on Bassett, which is above River and Granite Street. And a lot of the people on River, you know, are tenants, a low income. And when talking about, you know, their properties, most of the time that they have stuff in their yard basically because they can't afford to bring it to a dump or whatnot or a transfer station. And I'm just wondering if we, you know, go to their house, you know, find them for having stuff in their house, stuff in their yard, you know, what is, you know, they can't even afford to bring it somewhere. So is there going to be help for them to bring it somewhere? That almost sounds like getting blood from a stone.
Well, two ways to approach this. One, for example, we have a scrap metal day that's coming up. It's an option for people to have metal removed. But as you noted, it's going to be tough if it's a car and it needs to be moved or carried up there. That's going to be the cost, is how do we transport a dead car to a location where they can get rid of it. The other one is there are different organizations out there that will come and pick it up because they can sell the metal. There are numbers out there that are available. So in that option, people would probably come by and they say, if you give this item to me for free or sign it over to me, they may just take it. We'd want to explore that a little bit more. And maybe that's a question for code enforcement on who some individuals in the city might be in order to contact to remove some of those items.
Right, but I'm like talking, you know, there are some houses that have, you know, lumber in their yard. I mean, to me, it looks, you know, trashy, but to them, you know, it's the best they can do right now. So, you know, I'm just wondering if there's going to be, you know, if you're going there saying, hey, you need to pick up your yacht, then, you know, if there's going to be a way for them to get help or resource, if the code enforcement is going to give them resources, you know, for free or discounted services.
So I would, Chief Brent can jump in here. Over the last 10 years, the majority of stuff, like the mayor said, metal has not been an issue. Lumber has not been an issue long term, although short term we've had some bumps in the road. it's been the people that have just like piled up bags of trash and not gotten rid of them. Trash to the point where you can't see around it. It's not a matter of, you know, a single car in the yard. It's 3 or 4 vehicles in the yard, and those we have a mechanism to get rid of. The household garbage has been the hugest issue over the last 10 years. We have one group of individuals that filled a garage, and the manager may remember that. They filled a garage with just, instead of going to the curb and putting your trash to be hauled away, or going down on Saturday to, you know, the $2 a bag person, they filled the garage with garbage.
Is that on Merchant?
Yeah, on Merchant, yeah. And we don't have a mechanism for that. The other stuff we can work around, and I'm sure Chief Brent will dig in now because that's his shop.
Yes, I mean, obviously, Chief Bombardier makes a really good point. It's most of the time we're dealing with rubbish things. However, this ordinance does talk about those things like refrigerators, appliances, tires, and so forth. And we do have a tire day coming up, which is great. I understand the caller's question in that sometimes these things are bulky and people just can't move them. Probably the city manager needs to answer this, because I don't think that the city coming to pick it up or offering the resources to get this stuff moved is probably an option. As far as the cost goes, we generally work with people and give them ideas. We're willing to do that, match them up with the different organizations who were out there doing this stuff. So we certainly want it known to everybody in the public that the first thing we do isn't write somebody a ticket or fine them for not having this stuff taken care of. We like to think of those as the steps of last relief in this situation.
Councilor Maury?
I think we had also had a discussion about, I can't remember if it was for Green Up Day or something similar to Scrap Metal Day, where we would have a dumpster available, whether it was behind City Hall or something, where people could bring their large items down, whether it was, it shouldn't be mattresses because those are recyclable, but large items that they couldn't get to a transfer station, we would make it somewhat more accessible. That had been a discussion we had talked about and followed up on.
So, right, we have a number of items like, the metal recycle day. We talked about tires. Green Up Day is a good thing for, everywhere else in the city that's not from the house. And then it just seems like the last item is trash at household items, like your day-to-day trash that accumulates over time. And then I know that part of that conversation that Councilor Moore is talking about is, at what point does a person just hold all of their trash for this one day versus getting rid of it a little bit over time, because that trash can actually cause other issues with rodents. Tim, you might want to speak to that too.
Yeah, I was going to say, the tires, the electronics, the metal, the refrigerators, as long as they're blocked and secure so children can't get locked in them. We've had days every year for people to give them yard waste, etc. Your household garbage has been something you're responsible for. You can't leave it sit in a garage for 3 or 4 months if it's got food scraps, etc. And in theory, some of this is going to change come July 1st, with regards to composting stuff, etc. In theory, I say. But the reality is household garbage. That's been the biggest thing we haven't gotten a handle on, when people just choose not to, pay the $2 a week to get rid of your household garbage.
Right, and I don't disagree, and I know that people that for whatever reason, hoard garbage, but I'm also, right now the biggest calls I get right now on my personal cell are people that can't get to the transfer stations because of COVID. And so that, that's right now, but who knows what's going to happen in the future time.
So, Erica, no promises, but, and you've heard me say this before this week, those folks that are having issues with regards to transportation or accomplishing something, let's use Brooke for what she's here for. Let's tap into Brooke and see if she's got some other alternatives. Nothing's 100%, but it won't hurt to ask. And if you
No,
can have,
I get
reach
that.
out for me.
Okay. I'll put you on speed dial.
Okay. So again, no action on this item for tonight. Sounds like we will have this come back before us one more time before first reading, just to make sure that we have comments back from code enforcement. If you do have any other comments, any items that do pop up, I'm going to say, Councillor Maury, you're accepting those, or Councillor Steinman, you're accepting those?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments before we move on?
Would you like the drafts put up on the city website now, like we've done historically, or do you want to wait? You just let me know.
I think it would be great to have up there so that if anybody wants to reference what we were talking about tonight, they can look right at the city website and be able to find it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So moving on, we are on to item 9G, which is the taxi cab ordinance. And Councillor Maury.
Sure. So this has been out. I think a couple of us haven't seen it yet. I sent it out this afternoon. It was the latest draft from Oliver. Basically what I did is go through and make sure vehicles for hire was referenced everywhere throughout the document. I had some feedback from Carol on some grammar punctuation issues. There was one issue that she had pointed out. The first one was section 16-3, and if the page number helps, it's 1603. She was concerned about how it flowed where it says additional requirements for lawful operation of a vehicle for hire in the city of Barre. I don't know what people's thoughts are on that. It seems to make sense to me on additional requirements that we were looking for. That was one she had pointed out. And the other was, my note seems to be missing. Section 16-12, reporting and audits, subsection A, paragraph 16, page 1606. The clerk does not want to be responsible for auditing logs and records. So where it says the city clerk shall have the right to request, I would offer that we do city clerk or designee, which would then allow the city clerk to have somebody else audit those records. And the reason I think this is important is knowing that we have large companies in the city that operate vehicles for hire. If they were to come in and say, we're only going to pay you $20 for a month, knowing that they had thousands of fares, we could then have the right to go back through and review their records and audit the books to see if we are getting paid accordingly and what we should be.
I have a thought here.
Go ahead, Tim.
And I agree with Carol that this is probably not something her office should do, because if an audit shows a violation and we're involved in ticketing them, it's going to be a law enforcement officer. So both Jason Fleury and myself do inspections and sign off on vehicles for hire. I think this would be better addressed if it was the police chief and or her designee to do an audit. And that's probably going to come as a result of either a complaint or observations by our officers seeing somebody. I don't think we're going to randomly do audits, but if we see Snooky Smith from Burlington running 5 days a week in Barre City, we may ask for their records and do an audit of them and follow through with them with a warning and making them comply. But it's going to be law enforcement that's going to be issuing the tickets.
I would agree with that statement. I do like the city clerk piece being in there, because if we're auditing their records for fares, I don't know that you necessarily or Officer Fleury would want to be looking through the fares log to see if those are being recorded properly. But
Yeah,
maybe we have.
I don't want to be looking through the logs, but quite honestly, I went through 9 boxes of accounting for a criminal case. So looking at somebody's fare logs for 3 weeks or something, 3 months is not that big of a deal. And maybe we transfer that information to the clerk for billing purposes.
That would work for me. So what you're proposing is we have it be the chief of police and or designee.
Yeah, and or her designee. And then any information regarding operation of vehicles for hire within the city, that information be transferred to the clerk's office for billing.
Okay. I'm fine with that if everybody else is.
I'm fine with that.
Works for me.
Anything else, Rich, that you wanted to bring up? And then we
Nope.
got 2 hands coming up. I'll let you finish if you want, and then I'll have Councilor Hemrick and then Councilor Wazizak chime in.
Sure. I was just going to say the rest of it was pretty much perfunctory stuff throughout. So those were the only 2 things.
It looked really good. Thank you.
So, Councilor Hemrick?
Yeah, I was just curious if I had a couple questions, and first one is, do we need an exemption for Green Mountain Transit for would they ever meet the definition of a transportation network company?
I think I'd have to go back through and screen it, but they fall under one of those other definitions where they wouldn't be applicable.
It's just something to flag. Also, I'm just curious, how much do we bring in terms of revenue from the fees from this ordinance?
We'd have, if Carol's still on the line, she would have to answer that one.
I'm here. In the past, we've had the last couple of years, we've had a fairly sizable amount. We've had a number of drivers, more drivers than in the past. At the moment, we only have 2 or 3 vehicle companies and about the same, maybe up to 5 drivers, and each of them, the licenses are $63 a piece. So, we're talking less than $1,000.
Carol, what was the number of drivers from the former Green Cab that has since changed over to a contract driving service?
It was a little. They licensed about 20 drivers through the course of the year, but quite frequently a driver would get licensed and then quit within 24 hours to 2 weeks. So when we would deal with their renewals the following year, I would send them a list and say, these are all the drivers you licensed this past year. How many should I send renewals to? And we'd start back with like 5.
Councilor Hemrick, did you have any other question?
Yeah, the other thing is, it looks like I was just curious if we're treating the vehicle or the transportation network company drivers the same as taxi cab, because it seems like there's a lot of mentions of where certain sections apply to taxi cabs, but don't appear to apply to the transportation network drivers. So just something to keep an eye on.
I'm not sure which version you're looking at. I sent out a second one this afternoon where taxi cab had actually been changed to vehicle for hire throughout the entire document.
Okay.
So just to clarify that, so it was vehicles for hire throughout the entire document. And then also your first comment on page 1602, vehicles for hire, subsection 3, buses, trolleys, and other similar mass transit vehicles are exempt.
But but GMT has like our senior support services or special vehicles, single occupancy vehicle drivers that are providing some services and rides for fees. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but
I think that would be in section 2, right above it.
Yeah.
No, you're right, Councilor Hemrick. They have a number of volunteer drivers who take people to doctor's appointments and to the hospital and various and sundry other things like that. And drivers just get mileage. So we want to make sure that they're exempt.
Yeah, that's not just GMT, but there's also veterans organizations that have drivers that provide trips down to the vets hospital or vets home as well.
Yeah, the VA has a bunch of volunteer drivers that just give up their time and they're using a VA vehicle to drive from here to White River. They should be exempt also.
Yeah, I believe those are all in that section 2 right above.
So as we're looking through that, Councilor Wazizak, you had the next question.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that, like, I know initially when this was brought, I wasn't necessarily supportive of this the first time that this was brought around, but with Green Mountain Cab and other transportation companies moving in this direction, I definitely support the move.
So we are having some feedback on the line still, so I'm just gonna note if you're not talking, please mute your line.
Sorry.
And then, were there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Councilor Maury, I think those were the items that council has to address. And we might be at the point where one last look at it from the staff standpoint, just to make sure that we've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, and then maybe this will finally be ready for a first reading.
Sure, and I will make the changes as requested by the chief and send that back out.
If you send me that tomorrow, I'll take a quick look and go through it all again. Thank you.
Okay, perfect, will do.
So council, we are now at 9H, which is discussion and or approval of the revisions to the rules of procedure policy. So council,
If nobody wants me, I'm gonna leave.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
Take care, everybody. Have a good night.
You too. So council, I did send out that as a separate document. I have received some comments from Oliver, from some counselors, so I just made the document reflect those changes. So I'm going to show that document that you received and note the additional changes. And we can approach it in a couple different ways. I'm going to tell them both as we go through them as well. So here's the rules of procedure, which we did have as adopted. It was adopted in February of either 18 or 19. I'm sure it says up on the top of the document. February of 19, so it's a little over a year old. We did note that there are other bodies that have other legislation that dictates some of the things that they do. So for example, if there's something that says the Board of Civil Authority can adopt rules, we don't want to be counter to that. So I've put it in here one way, which is saying that what we are doing for our rules of procedure does by no means preclude the ability for those public bodies to adopt additional rules. The other way to handle this would be to say that this does not apply to them. And the reason why I'm showing this way and not the other is I think we would want to try to have some consistency about what each of those bodies are doing because they are reflective of what the city of Barre has for bodies. But also we want to make sure that they can do the items that they should be doing for deliberative session to address how their quorums are and so forth. And I'm just going to speak down through all of these and then I'll take the comments after. The advisory group, there's a change of just a word. Instead of it being a topic specific action, it's just what they do is they offer a guide to direct. So we're trying to direct, it's an action, direct specific action to staff, city staff or their designee. And the same thing, excuse me?
Would you like comments as you go along, or do you want to just go through it and we'll come back?
I was just going to go through the whole thing and then come back. This was just a spelling error. It was the word legislative or municipal mandate, and it was the word of instead of or. The same change there for advisory group. Oliver had noted down here for teams. This is where it came up, offer as a guide to direct specific action by city staff. Further down, it was a redefinition of emergency meetings because we really did not have one. The definition was only for special meetings, which according to the legislation, our current laws state that a special meeting can be warned for 24 hours notice, and there was nothing in there for emergency meetings. So we had put down the 4 hours for emergency meeting under special. So this is just to clarify those two items as separate types of meetings. Toward the end here, this is more where we're getting into meeting by electronic means. If a majority of the members wish to attend a meeting by electronic or other means, the requirements of VSA 13, I'm getting tongue-tied here myself. The requirements of VSA 312A2 must be met. And if any counselor is voting by electronic means, the voting must be done by roll call. So that's why earlier tonight when I was noting that it was a unanimous vote, we could have something on here that states it unless unanimous or something like that. But roll call, if there's any dissension, we want to make sure that we capture those votes as appropriate. And then for the meetings themselves, a lot of times that we warn the meeting, it doesn't just say it's a date and time, but there's actual action items on there. So it's just writing down what the agenda will be during those time frames. In the times that we do not have a physical location, we just want to make sure that there is a call-in number or video conference link that will be designated for that meeting. And then just to note, because of conversation that I had with Councillor Hemrick, we wanted to make sure that adjustments to the agenda were noted correctly. It's not that we're trying to supersede anything with putting something on the agenda so that something skirts by without public review. The adjustments of the agenda are typically made so that we can act on them appropriately, which are usually ratified at the next meeting. The word consensus was added in here for changing items that on the agenda as they flow through. That's just based on our past practice. We have jumped around a little bit and we don't take a majority vote of that. So if there was item A and we end up putting it after item E, then as long as nobody is objecting to that, that would be a consensus. And that way we can move forward accordingly and not break our own policy. And then the meetings may be recessed to another time, but we also need to know the means by which the council will meet. Again, we're in a time where it could be a video conference or in person, and we would want to make sure that people would know if it's going to be a go-to meeting or a conference call. And then in section E, it's a lot of the same stuff, but basically reiterating what was above in those changes. The one difference here is, unless otherwise stated by Vermont statute, our quorum is based on the 4 of the individuals needed for the affirmative vote. In other bodies of the city, that could be different, and that's designated by what those statutes said. So I think Board of Abatement's one that the clerk had brought up, so I just want to make sure that that was reflected. Other items, that this right here, since it was carried forward from above, it's just replacing the word council with the public body. Because we're talking about the public body other than the council. There's another one down here for that as well. And then of course, we're doing the same thing here for the public body. If a majority of the members of the public body wish to meet by electronic means, they still have to have that VSA 312A2 be met. And then we're almost at the end here. The public announcement and posted notice of their meetings have to be the same like ours. It has the call-in number or the video conferencing link. Again, with adjustments to the agenda, same thing with the consensus. Meetings to be recessed to another time by which the public meeting would meet, public body would meet. And then the last thing is we've been removing from the bottom of all of our policies the signature block, because we have this in public record already. It will note who was at council that night that this was passed, and so we're just removing those as part of our policy cleanup anyway. So that's a lot, but any questions? And Steve, I heard you speak up first.
Yeah, I had 2 or 3 minor spelling items or editorial, and then one a little bit more substantive. Back at the beginning, under item C, advisory group, in the first line, the word recommendation is singular. I think it reads better if it's plural, recommendations. A group appointed to provide input or recommendations offered as a guide to topic-specific action.
Okay.
And I don't have it in front of me, but I think you were referring to Oliver's comments, and I think you said he inserted the word direct specific action.
Instead of it being topic specific action, the word that we had in there last time we went through, I think the discussion around the advisory group was an advisory group is around a specific topic. And that's what we were trying to state, is that based on the topic, that's why the advisory group is there. But an advisory group by default is specific to a topic. So the change was, it's to direct specific action. It's there to make sure that you have the information you need as an advisory group, the same thing that a city staff team would do. And so that's why the language is the same as advisory group. The only difference really is, in an advisory group, you're going to have people that are outside of city staff that would be a part of it. It could be a member of the public. It could be somebody that comes in as a analyst or something else that we request. Whereas the team is literally like the parking team. It's a group of city individuals.
My concern is with the word direct, as I thought it was utilized there. And to me, the purpose of an advisory group is to do just that, is to advise. It's not, I would not want it to be read such that the advisory group can direct the manager or direct the staff to do something. An advisory group doesn't have that authority. So if there's a way to address the concern that Oliver was speaking to, but not use the word direct, I feel a lot better.
So
Carol, I think you could solve it by putting in a hyphen. I think the problem is that and unfortunately I've had to switch to phone, and now I don't have access to, I can't see the materials, but the word that he wanted to replace with direct should be hyphenated to the word next to it to make sure that that's what the problem is, that it doesn't, that would clarify it. If someone can read it to me, I can explain it to you better.
Yeah, I'm going to put in the word topic again because that makes sense to me, and I'll read it out.
So topic hyphen specific, that would solve the problem.
I agree, Carol. I think that's a great suggestion.
So does everybody on the call, the video conference, understand what we're saying?
Affirmative.
And Steve, you said any other suggestions?
Yeah, just a couple other, next 2 lines, 2 sections down, council means. I think the word mean should be plural, means. Right now it reads council mean the city councilors. It should be council means the city councilors.
You said 2 lines down.
Yeah, well, you had advisory group, then, I mean, two topics down, 2 definitions down, advisory group, board, and then council.
Okay.
Council means the city councilors.
Yep.
One last, legally one like that, at the top of the next page. Teams means a group of city-specific appointed, city staff appointed to provide input or recommendations, plural, offered as a guide.
Okay.
And then the more substantive one is, well, it's on page 4. It's new item 4, I think. Wait a minute. Yeah, well, actually, I had a couple of them. The way this reads right now, it's each regular and special meeting of the council shall have an agenda with time allotted for each item. Well, obviously, we don't do that. We talked about that at one time and never migrated that to that. It's I think the way we format the agenda and work through the agenda works fine. trying to establish times for each of these items is really a stab in the dark. I think you can easily get far astray from posted times. So my suggestion is we take out that phrase "with time allotted."
Okay, and I'm just going back to the screen so I can see people's faces. I'm seeing nods of yes. Okay, next one, Steve.
Yes, hold on. Okay, I'm sorry, I skipped over it. Page 3. It's new item, I think it's 12. Looks like 112, but I think it's 12B. And it's the clause that says the public announcement and posted notice of the meeting shall designate at least one physical location, a call-in number, or video conferencing link. And the way I read that is that it says you need to have at least one physical location. I'm thinking that if you put in the word "or" after physical location, in other words, shall designate a physical location, comma, or a call-in number or video conferencing link. Because right now, I think that could be read to say, well, you got to have somebody from the public could say you've got to have a physical location. And I don't think that's the intent at all.
No, the intent is, so it has to be at least one of those items. It could be all three, but the intent is that it's at least one of those.
Yes, but I don't think it reads that way right now. I think it should read shall designate at least a physical location or a call-in number or the video conferencing link. I just think somebody could say, well, wait a minute, it says right here you got to have a physical location. Then you get into a debate of semantics.
Except that under the standard law, you do have to have a physical location.
Well, but I thought what we were trying to do is, and I realize we're able to video conference right now, at least under the current open meeting law as it's been amended. I guess the question is, will that revert back to previous standards or not?
Yes, it will.
Okay. Well, if it's gone, and I guess I was reading in the context of where we are now. If it's gone, then I guess it reads okay.
Okay.
Well, on that paragraph, I disagree. I'd say we're under an emergency legislation that allows a call-in number or video conferencing link. But once the declaration is lifted, this would no longer be consistent with open meeting law if we kept this language. So I think we need to acknowledge that this is a temporary situation. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Well,
So
if that's
public announcement, I'm looking, do you have any other suggested language on the back of this?
Lucas?
Yes.
If accepting Jacob's and Carol's comments as factual, then maybe we don't try to change this part of the ordinance for something that's really temporary, allowed by state statute on a temporary basis, but is going to default back to previous open law requirements. Maybe we just take out the reference to a call-in number or video conferencing link, operate under the temporary provisions of the open meeting law, and then when those are reversed or eliminated, this will read the way it should read. Just a thought. I'll let you guys rest of it.
So I'm just trying to throw in some other language there. The public announcement and posted notice of the meeting shall designate at least one physical location unless an emergency situation is allowed for by law. And then I just leave the rest of it blank. That should be a comma. Where the member of the public can attend or can participate in the meeting. So I'll make the one last change. I'll let people take it in for a second, and then I'll go for comments.
Go ahead, Teddy. Go ahead.
So under the way I was reading this, I'm not sure specific, you were talking about, my understanding of the rules as they stand now is that we were only able to, before COVID, we were only able to vote when calling in and not being physically present if your vote was the determination for a quorum. I believe my reading of this policy, that is no longer the case.
Right, that would no longer be the case in the way that this is written, correct.
And that is a permanent change, not just a COVID temporary Act 92 change.
Right, the way that it would read is if a majority of the members wish to attend a meeting by electronic or other means, we have to abide by the law. But if any counselor is voting by electronic means, voting must be done by roll call. And that way there, if, for example, you are not at the meeting and you still want to attend and you feel like you should be able to vote, this would allow for that. Where in the past it's been, you can attend the meeting, you can provide comments, but your vote did not count.
Right, perfect. Yeah, I like this. Yep.
Okay. Any other comments or suggestions? Yes, Jake.
Yeah, under let's see, I don't have page numbers, and of course my computer's freezing up right now, but it was paragraph 12, subparagraph E, the adjustments to the agenda. That's under the public comment section, and to me it seems like it's a better fit with paragraph 14, where it's about changing any additions or changes to the agenda. So that, to me, that just makes more sense in that section. And then again on a related matter in paragraph 17, there's it removes the place certain.
In which paragraph?
Paragraph 17.
So meetings may be recessed to another time. And right, note the means by which the council will meet. So it should be note the place by which the council will meet. Or actually it'd just be reverting you back what it was. So if I reject that and reject this, this is how it read previously. Meetings may be recessed to, and it said a time and place certain. And you're not going to be able to meet at the same exact time. So that's why it's changed to another time and place certain. Does that
meets my concern. The other, just I have 6 points that I'd like to offer for discussion, or not necessarily amendment tonight, but just I think it'd be worthwhile to think about a requirement to have an affirmative motion to extend a meeting beyond 2.5 hours or 9:30 p.m. And I think a lot of research out there shows that decision-making quality and riskiness goes up as the meeting goes on longer. It would also be nice to have a requirement that all meeting materials be submitted to council Friday prior to the Tuesday regular meeting. I know, for instance, for this meeting, there were maybe 3 to 5, maybe 6 items that have arrived in the past 24 hours, which are 48 hours, which makes it very difficult for a working person to prepare and come ready to engage in this meeting. And I think it's a courtesy to be able to provide enough notice that we have the weekend to look through the packet. Another requirement I think would be nice is if not all non-confidential council meeting materials are posted online for the public to view, and that there be a standard cover memo and form and content approved by council as an addendum to the policy that helps frame an efficient introduction to all council decisions. So those are some items that I think could help us be a more effective public body.
So, for example, with the agenda that's released on Friday, if the items are not included by Friday when that's released, those items, if it's not needed to be acted on Tuesday, then it's just included on the next agenda for the next week.
Yeah, and I did a poll of the Planners Association. We're one of two bodies, governing bodies that I could find that meet on a weekly basis in the state of Vermont. It's pretty unusual. And Barrytown's the other one.
Just the berries, huh?
And I can imagine for staff that just feels like you're on a constant treadmill where there's less time to implement and execute, and more time spent preparing and being in meetings.
So with your comment with 2.5 hours, I agree. Anytime that we've gone over that is when we have run into issues. I have asked at times where it's approaching 9:30, do we want to continue? And sometimes it's bad when we say sure. So I don't even know if we should allow it. It's one of those things where it's caused issues for sure. So we do have our guidelines that we go by too, which we can review, and I can make sure that that's added to that list. I like the making sure that things are available in the packet. The concern there is if there is an item that does need to be acted on and we don't receive the information in time, and it can't be pushed off. So I guess just looking at the agenda for today as an example, the item for taxi cab came in a little bit later. The rules of procedure I sent out this weekend, so that came in a little bit later as well. So I'm just making sure that those items are included as part of the agenda that comes out on Friday. Steve?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I mean, I can understand Jacob's desire to have everything complete in the packet by Friday, and I've really tried hard since he made that first observation, whatever it was, a month ago, to make sure that make sure it's probably the wrong phrase, but try hard to make sure the packets were complete. And frankly, right now we're trying to make sure they're complete by 10 o'clock Friday morning, because I'm trying not to have Jody come back in late in the afternoon again. But I mean, the reality for me, and quite honestly, it may be for some of the other department heads, but I know for me, I usually have to use a good chunk of the weekend to get caught up and or to be able to prepare thoughtful and comprehensive memos for the council. So I'm more than willing to, and I have started to try to do my best to make sure that that my items are in the packet on Friday. But I mean, I can't guarantee it. So I guess the default would be, and I guess I've always said this, the default is that if there's an action item that for one reason or another a counselor doesn't believe they've had enough time to review supporting documentation, then it can be deferred. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be instances where there's going to be something that for whatever reason is time sensitive and we may have a crunch, but I'm not sure that I can meet the requirement for every packet, at least stuff coming from the manager is going to be in every Friday packet. I'll do my darndest, but it's just the operating environment I'm in.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that, particularly because this body meets weekly. I think that puts staff on this constant treadmill where, where there's no downtime.
I think that's the point that we probably should address is, instead of us meeting every week, maybe we do look into doing what is actually in our charter that says we have to meet once every 2 weeks. And that way there you have more time to put items onto the agenda and they are complete by the Friday.
Ironically, as manager, I can see it both ways. There's an advantage to weekly meetings because it gives you time to, it gives you an opportunity to get stuff on the agenda that you didn't see coming 2 weeks ahead of time. So there's the benefit. I mean, I've gone back and forth my own mind. Do I prefer bi-weekly meetings or weekly meetings or whatever? And going back to what Jacob was saying, depending on what items that I have on the agenda, it can take me 2 to 8 hours to get ready for a council meeting or prepare the documentation. So it's not like I deliberately wait till the last minute. It's just the week consumes you, and then you get what you call, free time on the weekend to pull stuff together. So just trying to be candid about that. There was, the other comment, I have absolutely no issue or concern with providing a cover memo. And I think my track record, at least for items that I put on the agenda, has been very good. I've always tried to prepare thorough, complete cover memos that really give counselors an opportunity to be fully briefed, and secondly, help make the meeting more efficient because it cuts down a lot of the discussion time. My only concern is with the word standard. That makes it feel to me like somehow we got to crunch stuff into a particular format. I'd request the indulgence of the council to say, hey, if you give comprehensive substantive briefing memos, that meets what your objectives are. I'm I have a little angst at the word standard memo, that's all. So my 2 cents.
I'm going to try to find a happy medium here. We didn't have much for a meeting for next week anyway. So if we went forward and we canceled next meeting agenda for April 28th, it would give until May 5th for the next meeting. That would give a lot of time in order to set up that next agenda, and we can see if everything can be put in the packet by Friday. If there are items that need to have cover memos, we can see what they look like, and then that's what it comes out as. And then use that as the first trial, and then we'll try it again maybe the next 2-week period. If it works out okay, then we can see if that can continue. I'm up for.
From my perspective, as a matter of practice, I'm not comfortable putting something on the agenda that I don't have what I think is a complete and substantive cover memo. So my practice won't change in terms of having memos. They just may not be identical every time.
Understood. Councilor Wazizak?
Yeah, I have an idea. What if we were to do, because we're, in this COVID world where so much of our work is predetermined, and we're going into the summer where we traditionally cancel 3 or 4 meetings over the course of the summer anyway, might it be worth it for staff and council maybe to do a 3 to 6 month trial period of meeting every other week to give staff the opportunity to see more than just 1 month's worth of trying? If it's something people would be open to, I think it would be. I think that staff and council would need more than 1 month's worth of meetings to figure out whether that system could work. And I think 3 months to 6 months in the place we are now socially and going into the summer, the timing might be right here.
And I'm fine with that. How about, even further suggestion is we do it for the next month and then we see how it went. And then if it worked well, then we keep going every other week. If it doesn't work well, then maybe we just cancel the 1 meeting per month like we did last year. Because that did seem to work well. It gave time for Steve to address some of the other items. And then at the same time, we can make sure that we're giving at least the Friday packet a good chance to being complete and in order. And then I think even with these video meetings, we've actually been going less than 2 hours typically. Tonight we're going to go a little bit longer because we have an executive session, but it's been going at a pretty good pace recently. If everyone's fine with that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that there are things that come along that statutorily and by charter, certain deadlines and dates that we have to meet that are not going to fit conveniently into like an every other week schedule. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that, when we have to have our meeting to set the tax rate, we have to have our meeting to set the tax rate. And when we have to have the next Board of Abatement meeting to talk about waiver of late fees, we're going to have that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Nope, noted. We'll just try the best that we can, see if it works. Jake, you mentioned that you surveyed other communities to see how they are operating. and we can see how they operate in the same manner too, to see when they actually have to meet extra because of it.
Yeah, and in fact, the city of St. Albans only meets once monthly, their council.
Montpelier, I think, meets every other week.
Bi-weekly, yeah.
Or about 4.5 hours.
Yeah, you're right, Carol. That's the other benefit of, I mean, it's not black and white, and there are pros and cons. And the advantage of weekly meetings is that they tend to be shorter.
Okay. So with all the suggestions, I'm just going to throw up the policy one more time. And did anybody else have any other suggestions to add or change or anything? And hearing none, so I will look for a motion to approve the rules of procedure policy as modified.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Steinman, seconded by Councillor Wozniak. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Councillor Hemrick?
Aye.
Councillor Maury?
Aye.
Councillor Reel?
Aye.
Councillor Steinman?
Aye.
Councillor Wozniak?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. Thank you very much. Since we are at the end, we'll do roundtable, and I'm going to note that we will have an executive session, which our new rules of policy and procedure will, our rules of procedure will dictate. We do have a call-in number that I will call into everybody. I will mute everything on this line so this stays active, so that when we come out of executive session, that we'll come back to this and we can then adjourn from here. But we are at roundtable, so I'll go straight down the list. Councillor Hemrick, is there anything you would like to share?
I'd just like to say it's been so great to see so many people out walking and biking around the city safely, and just to remind drivers to be really cognizant of the kids that are out. I saw a kid just out my window while working here crash on his bike in the middle of the street, and I know there are times where I see cars just rip through here, where that could have been a very, very sad story for a family and for a driver. So I think everybody should be driving the speed limit. 20 is plenty.
Thank you. Councillor Murray?
Yeah, I would also echo those sentiments. Myself and my family and kids, we've been able to get out into the cow pasture and really explore the trails. The snow's finally gone. The trails have started to dry out. And I know in my social media posts that a lot of people have reached out to me and said that they either A, they didn't know where the cow pasture was, B, what the cow pasture was, or C, even how to get there. So I think it's been a great opportunity for people to find things within the city that they didn't necessarily know about and may have never been to or explored before. So it's, one bright side is getting out and being able to explore nature and what there is to see.
I've noticed a lot more traffic up in the cow pasture in the last 2 to 3 weeks. People I've never seen up there before.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. But that being said, it's still easy to maintain social distancing. There's enough space out there for people to be able to get by and not have to worry about running into anybody. So it's pretty awesome.
Thank you. Councillor Reel?
Basically everything everybody else said. I actually really miss the kids in my street waiting for the bus, but also slow down. I know up here is a back road, but we see cars zipping by, and we do have a lot of kids on these back streets. And but it's been really nice getting out and exploring and finding new places and new haunts in my adopted city. So anyway, be safe, everybody.
Thank you, and you too. Councillor Steinman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that this has been a trying time for many of us, and I think that there are so many lessons to be learned from this experience, but I think also it's allowed a lot of us to rediscover some family time. So before this all happened, obviously Jeffrey was off at school, but we rarely sat down at the table except on Sundays to eat dinner. And now, every day, we're sitting down to eat dinner together as a family. And it's special. So even though the times are dark, there are some silver linings to be had here. With that, everyone else, stay safe.
Thank you. And yes, my belly is growing just as big because we are having a lot more sit-down meals for sure. Councillor Wozniak.
Yeah, definitely echoing that sentiment and finding the silver linings in this situation, definitely helping us all stay sane. Big shout out as well to B&W Print and Design right downtown. They've printed up some free lawn signs for folks to take that, thanking our healthcare workers, thanking our essential workers, and just a nice, positive, stay healthy message. I went down and grabbed one this afternoon when I did some shopping. So right on Merchants Row, for anyone watching, right behind CW, the rear entrance to CW Print and Design, you can go down and grab a free lawn sign and throw that up to help spread some positivity.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just know, I'm going to say happy birthday to my girlfriend, Sarah. She had her birthday yesterday. We did spend a lot of time outside. Basically, her birthday, her 40 days that she did for me are a little bit different than what I was able to do for her. But we were able to be outside on her property and get a lot of work done, which I'm sure she appreciates. I mean, I don't know if I appreciate it as much right now, but it probably is good in the long run with all those meals that we are sitting in and eating otherwise. So more seriously though, so we will be looking at seeing if Zoom is going to be a better tool than GoToMeeting, just to make sure. I mean, this has been working fine, but there will be a time where it's not a free tool. We also need to make sure that the tool is best for our committees as well. And I just got a message from Central Vermont Television noting the differences in their ability to use these tools. So we've been able to use it thus far, but we're going to have to look into it a little bit differently. And then finally, just for the upcoming year, I will send out a document to all of you so that you can see where we currently are for our FY20 priorities. But really, it's more to gather what your ideas will be for FY21. It's just around the corner. We've done what we can for the deficit mitigation through the COVID management and the response, but there's still regular work we need to get done too. So I do want to thank Councilor Maury for the vehicle for hire ordinance. So we'll make sure we get that name change, and Councilor Steinman for those two ordinances that he's been working on to modify. And we have a couple other policies that we have on that list to modify, but we're down to the last little bit, and we just need to make sure that we're still managing that, and we have the items that we want to move forward with for the next year. With that, we are going to need an executive session. One of the items is for personnel. One of them is for litigation. And Steve, did you need another one for anything else?
Yeah, contract.
Contracts. Okay, so I would look for a motion for findings for personnel, litigation, and contracts.
I move to find the premature general public knowledge of contracts, pending litigation, and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the third one.
Personnel.
Personnel. Issues to be discussed would clearly place the city of Barre at a substantial disadvantage should the discussion be public, and move to enter executive session to discuss those items under the provisions of 1 VSA 313.
Very descriptive. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll just say seconded.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, already violated the rule. We have to do a roll call vote. Councillor Hemrick?
Aye.
Councillor Maury?
Aye.
Councillor Reel?
Aye.
Councillor Steinman?
Aye.
Councillor Wozniak?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. And the follow-up vote is to go into an executive session and invite the city manager and planning director into that session. Rich, do you want to make that motion?
So moved.
And then
Seconded.
seconded by Councilor Wozniak. All those in favor? Councilor Hemrick,
Aye.
Councilor Maury,
Aye.
Councilor Rio,
And she left.
okay, Councilor Steinman,
Aye.
Councilor Wozniak.
Aye.
Okay, and I'm an aye as well. Note that we did not hear from Councilor Rio. We'll either see her in executive session or we'll have to note that it was either an abstention or a no, either way. Okay, so we will call on that line and give it about 4 minutes. So 9:20, we'll be on that call. I'm going to mute everyone on this line so that we're not having a communication on in the public, but we'll leave it
Good night,
open.
everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, Doug.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
do you have an idea of time? Or should I ask one of you to record the outs and such?
I will record the outs and such for you.
Okay, thank you. Good night, all.
Good night.
Night.
Night,
Okay,
Carol.
Steve, expect any action?
So we'll go into executive session. I'll hear from you in about 3 minutes on the other line. Don't turn this off because we'll have to come back here to come out of executive session and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.